This happened last fall when I was staying in a small town in northern Pennsylvania for work. I do commercial refrigeration repair, and at the time I was driving to different grocery stores and restaurants in smaller towns because our company was short on people. The town I was sent to was the kind of place where everything shut down early, and there were more empty buildings than open ones. I was supposed to be there for 3 nights while I worked on the walk-in freezers at an older family-owned supermarket. My company booked me a motel on the edge of town because it was the only place nearby with vacancy. I got there a little after 7 p.m. on a Thursday. The motel was one of those single-floor places where all the room doors faced the parking lot. It had maybe 12 rooms total, and only 4 or 5 cars in the lot. The office smelled like old coffee and bleach. The woman at the desk was probably in her 60s. She was friendly, but there was something distracted about her. She kept glancing past me toward the parking lot while I was checking in. When she handed me the key, she told me if anyone knocked on my door at night, not to answer it unless it was her or the owner, and if I heard anything weird outside, to call the office and not get involved. She said it in a casual voice, like it was just normal advice, but it caught me off guard. I asked if that was because the area was bad, and she just said there were some drifters around sometimes, and they liked to ask guests for money. I remember thinking it was a strange thing to say to someone who had just arrived, but I was tired and didn't really care. My room was near the far end, second to last. Inside, it was clean enough, but old. I noticed cigarette burns in the dresser, and the carpet had dark spots. I brought my bag in, grabbed food at the gas station down the road, and came back around 8. While I was walking to my room, I noticed a man sitting in an older dark green pickup truck 2 spaces away from mine. The truck was running, but the headlights were off. I couldn't see his face clearly because of how dark it was, but I remember he didn't look at me the way a normal person would when someone walks by. He just sat perfectly still, both hands on the wheel. I assumed he was waiting for someone. I went inside and spent the next hour eating and watching random stuff on my phone. Around 10:30, I took a shower and got into bed. Maybe 20 minutes later, I heard footsteps outside my room. That didn't bother me at first. Other people were staying there. Then the footsteps stopped right outside my door. I waited for someone to unlock it or knock on the room next to mine, but nothing happened. After maybe 15 seconds, the steps moved on. A minute later, I heard them again, slowly coming back the other direction, and stopping outside my door a second time. Still no knock, just silence. Then the footsteps walked away again. I got up and looked through the peephole, but I couldn't see anyone. I told myself it was probably just someone drunk or confused about which room was theirs. A little after 11, I was half asleep when someone knocked on the door. I stayed still and waited. Then the person knocked again, the same exact way. I got up quietly and looked through the peephole again. There was nobody there. That made my stomach drop. The parking lot lights were dim, but the walkway in front of the rooms was empty. I stood there for a while, then locked the deadbolt again, even though it was already locked. I was about to get back into bed when I noticed the curtain near the window had shifted slightly. It wasn't open enough to see out, just enough to make me realize someone might be able to see in from outside, depending on where they stood. I moved it shut and turned off the lamp. I stayed awake another half hour, just listening. Right around midnight, I heard something that sounded like metal lightly scraping against metal near the door. I got up and stepped as quietly as I could toward it. For the 3rd time, I looked through the peephole. This time, I saw movement. Somebody was crouched low, almost underneath the peephole view. I could only see the top of a dark baseball cap and one shoulder. I don't know how long I stood there, but it couldn't have been more than 5 seconds before the person stood up and moved away fast toward the end of the building. I called the office right away. The woman who answered sounded annoyed at first, until I told her someone had been right outside my door. Then she got quiet. She asked if I had opened it. I said no. She told me to stay inside and said the owner was going to check outside. About 2 minutes later, I saw headlights sweep across the curtain. Someone drove slowly through the lot and then left. The office called back and said nobody was out there now, and it was probably just someone messing around. I asked if I should call the police, and she said it wouldn't do any good unless the person came back. I barely slept after that. Every little sound woke me up. At some point around 3 a.m., I finally passed out, but I woke up at 5:15 to the sound of my truck door alarm going off. I jumped out of bed and looked through the window. There was a man standing at the driver's side of my truck with the door half open. Tall, dark jacket and hat. I couldn't see his face because he was turned away from me. Then he looked straight toward my room, like he knew I was watching. He shut the truck door and walked off fast toward the road behind the motel. I called 911. The police came about 15 minutes later. They took a report and checked my truck, but found nothing missing because I never leave anything in it. One officer asked if I was sure I'd locked it, which made me feel like they already didn't believe me. I knew I locked it. The older officer seemed more interested when I told him about the knocking and the figure crouching outside my door. He asked the motel owner if they had cameras. They did, but only one in the office and one pointing at the front entrance. Nothing covering my side of the lot. Before the cops left, the older one told me if it happened again, not to open my door for any reason and to leave as soon as I could in the morning. I asked if they thought it was random. He just said probably, but his face didn't really match that answer. I had to work that day, and I was already there, so I stayed. I figured I was overreacting anyway. During the day, everything felt normal. I was at the supermarket from 7 a.m. to almost 6 p.m. By the time I got back to the motel, it was dark again. I parked directly under the brightest light and carried all my tools inside at once so I wouldn't have to go back out. The woman at the desk saw me and asked if I was okay. I told her I hadn't slept. She hesitated for a second, then said if I wanted, she could move me to room 2, near the office. I asked why she hadn't offered that the night before. She said she didn't think it was necessary. Then she added something I've thought about several times since. She said, "It usually doesn't happen 2 nights in a row." I asked what that meant, and she immediately acted like she'd misspoken. She just said the drifters normally move on. That made me more uneasy than I already was. I seriously thought about packing up and driving an hour to another hotel. But I was exhausted, filthy from work, and told myself I could just stay one more night and leave in the morning. Around 8 p.m., I got food and brought it back to my room. While I was eating, I heard a truck drive slowly through the lot. I looked through the curtain. It was the same dark green pickup from the night before. It drove past my room, turned around near the road, and parked at the very end of the lot with the lights off. I called the office. The owner answered this time, not the woman. He sounded irritated and told me if the truck wasn't blocking me in or damaging anything, there wasn't much he could do. I asked if he knew who it was. He just said, "People come and go." I sat there for maybe an hour checking the window every few minutes. The truck never moved. Eventually, I turned off the TV and lights and tried to sleep with my clothes still on. Sometime after 11, I heard someone walking outside again. Slow, super slow steps. Then a soft tap at the window. Not the door. The window. Then another tap, this time closer to the center of the glass. And then a fingernail, or something like it, dragged slowly down the window. I could hear it clearly. I had never felt fear like that before, because I knew whoever was doing it was standing inches away from where I was lying, and they knew I was in there. Pretending to be asleep, I grabbed my phone and started dialing 911. But before I hit call, I heard the bathroom window rattle. That tiny frosted window above the toilet. And then I heard something even worse. The sound of the room next to mine opening, like an actual key or a tool working the lock, and then the door swinging open. That room had been empty when I checked in. I knew that because I had looked through the crack in the curtains the night before and never saw a car or lights there. I got out of bed and crouched near the wall that connected our rooms. I could hear movement next door. Not the heavy footsteps of somebody checking in, more like somebody trying not to make a sound. I called 911 and whispered everything as quietly as I could. The dispatcher kept telling me to stay on the line. While I was talking, I heard one hard hit on the shared wall behind the headboard, like someone testing how solid it was. Then another, lower down. And then nothing. I was trying so hard to listen that I could hear my own breathing, my own heartbeat. Then I heard the bathroom window in my room start to move. It wasn't rattling this time. It was opening, just a little. I ran to the bathroom and shoved it closed with both hands. Something on the other side pushed back. Not that hard, but enough for me to feel it. I locked the latch, even though it looked flimsy as hell, and backed away. The dispatcher told me officers were 2 minutes out. I could hear movement outside my front door now too, like there was more than one person. Then came the soft knocking on the door. Same as the night before. I didn't answer. I grabbed the motel chair and jammed it under the doorknob, even though I knew that probably wouldn't do much. The police arrived maybe a minute later, but it felt like 10. As soon as headlights swept across the curtain, I heard running. At least 2 sets of footsteps. The officers found that the screen on my bedroom window had been removed and was lying in the bushes. They also found fresh pry marks on my truck door and on the door of the empty room next to mine. What I didn't find out until later was the worst part. The older officer from that morning came back and asked me privately if I had anyone angry at me or if I had posted online that I was staying there. I said no. Then he told me they had seen that green pickup before. According to him, there had been 2 other incidents in the previous 6 months involving men staying alone at that same motel for work. In both cases, someone had tried getting into their vehicles during the night. One guy said he heard people outside his room, but left before reporting anything else. The other woke up to his motel door cracked open, even though he swore he had locked it. Nothing had been taken in either case. The officer said they believed the group was following out-of-town men from bars or work sites, then waiting until they were isolated and trying to get inside their rooms. He never said exactly what he thought the end goal was, but he didn't need to. I packed my stuff while 2 officers stood outside. When I checked under the bed before leaving, which I normally never do anywhere, there was a folded piece of paper shoved almost against the wall. I only noticed it because I dropped my phone charger. It was part of a local newspaper torn into a square. And on the back, somebody had written my room number and my truck's license plate in pen. That meant whoever it was hadn't just picked me at random that night. They had been watching long enough to write things down. I left the motel before 1 a.m. and drove almost 2 hours home. Even though I had one more day of work scheduled, my company sent someone else the following week, and I found out later he stayed in a different town. Besides telling the story just now, I really try to just put this experience behind me. This story started in October of last year. I was single and decided to download Tinder to see if I could find someone. After a few swipes, I got a match. I started smiling and opened with a simple, "Hey, what's up?" He responded quickly, and we started talking all day, every day. He said he was in the military at a base not too far from where I lived. Eventually, after a few weeks of talking, he became possessive over me. He would say things like, "You're mine. If I can't have you, no one can. And if you block or unfriend me, I'll kill you," along with other threats. Keep in mind, we had never even met. We hadn't even started dating. One day in December, he unfriended me on Snapchat, and I didn't think too much of it. I moved on and kept living my life until a few days ago when he added me again. Remembering the threats, I decided to accept so he wouldn't do anything. He sent a snap that said, "I've been thinking about your beautiful smile for 8 weeks now. I keep thinking about what we could be if I didn't let my dark thoughts win." I responded with, "That's cute." Not because I meant it, because I didn't want to make him angry. We started talking again, and I responded mostly out of fear over what he might do if I didn't. He was acting like a possessive boyfriend, always asking where I was, who I was with. He kept asking me to turn on my Snapchat map so he could make sure I was safe. I didn't want to. He already freaked me out. Then, last Thursday, I was driving around with a friend until about 1 a.m. I asked if he could drop me off at home, which he did. We said our goodbyes, and I walked up the alleyway to my house. I had never given anyone my address. I saw a man standing there and didn't think much of it until he called my name. I didn't know who he was, so I responded, "Yes? Who's asking?" Then I saw his face. My heart skipped a beat. I started cold sweating. I felt panic take over my body, and I started shaking. He grabbed my neck with his hand and slammed my head hard into the wall. Then he just stared at my face. He kept saying things like, "Who were you with? Why are you out this late? Was it a man?" I stood there completely terrified. He was choking me so hard I had tears in my eyes, gasping for air. I genuinely thought he was going to kill me right there in that alleyway. He kept squeezing harder until he finally threw me to the ground, head first. I whimpered from the pain and gasped as he let go of my throat. I looked up at him. His eyes were empty, completely empty. He didn't feel bad at all. Then he sat on top of me and slapped me hard across the face. I put my hand where he hit me as tears filled my eyes again. And then he started choking me again. This time I was more sure than ever that I wasn't going to survive this. I looked up at the black sky and started thinking about my dog who had passed away. I was even smiling a little as I felt myself beginning to lose consciousness. Then suddenly, he let go. He said, "Oh no, I have to go. The last bus is leaving in 3 minutes." And then he ran, while I lay on the cold, wet ground, trying to remember how to breathe. I was in shock. I didn't know what to do. I tried to call my best friend and tell him what happened, but I couldn't talk. My vocal cords had been choked so badly I couldn't make a single sound. My friend only heard strange noises on the line and said he was on his way. When I got to his house, I fell asleep on the couch within 3 minutes. I was completely gone. While I slept, my friend called the police. The next day, he drove me to the station so I could give my statement. After I was questioned, the police decided my life was in too much danger to just let me go unprotected. I was given an alarm device, a tracker with multiple buttons that would immediately alert police to my exact location, because they all knew he would come back. 3 days ago, I was followed by a friend of his. If a friend hadn't been nearby to pick me up, I don't think I would be here to tell this story. The police told me his intention was to kill me. If he had his own car, or if there had been a later bus, I would probably be dead. Every time I leave the house now, I fear he's watching. He's told me he always will be. One day, I might not see him coming. He might be waiting in that dark alleyway again, and I might not trigger the alarm in time. I'm not safe. I just wanted to share this in case something happens to me. Be careful, everyone. He found me even though I never gave him a single piece of information about where I live. My name is Mike, and this happened last October when I decided to take a solo camping trip in the Smoky Mountains. I'd been feeling burnt out from work and just wanted a couple of quiet days away from everything. I had done solo trips before and never had any issues, so this didn't feel like a big deal at the time. I left early in the morning and the drive took most of the day. A couple hours before reaching the park, I stopped at a small roadside diner. I was getting hungry and knew food options would be limited once I got deeper into the mountains. The place was pretty empty. Just a few older people drinking coffee and a waitress who looked like she'd been working there forever. I sat at the counter and ordered a burger and fries. While I was eating, I noticed a man sitting a few stools down from me. He wasn't doing anything strange exactly, but he kept glancing in my direction without fully turning his head. I figured he probably just noticed I wasn't local. At one point, he asked where I was headed. I told him I was going camping up in the mountains. He just nodded and said, "Be careful out there." I asked what he meant. He just shrugged. "It gets real quiet out there at night." I didn't think too much into it. I paid the bill and left. By late afternoon, I reached the area where I planned to park, just a dirt pull-off near a trailhead with no other cars around. This should have maybe been my first sign to pick somewhere else. But I like being alone. I grabbed my backpack and gear and started hiking in. The trail wasn't too hard, but it took longer than I expected. I started realizing I was going to be setting up camp close to dark. I eventually found a small clearing that looked good enough, flat, with enough space for my tent and a small fire. I rushed to get everything set up before the light disappeared. By the time I finished, The woods had already gone that gray color they get right before full night falls. I gathered some sticks and got a small fire going. Sitting by that fire actually felt nice at first. I made some s'mores and just listened to the normal sounds of the woods, bugs, wind through the trees. Then, after maybe half an hour, I heard something that didn't match the other sounds. Footsteps on leaves. Human footsteps. I looked up and saw a man standing maybe 30 or 40 feet away between the trees. Just standing there, facing me. I couldn't see his face clearly because of the low light, but I could tell he was watching. I called out and asked if he was all right. He stepped a little closer into the edge of the firelight and said hello. Just that one word. Nothing else. I asked if he was camping nearby. He deflected my question with one of his own. Are you out here alone? That question made my stomach drop. I hesitated before answering and then told him no. That my friends were meeting me soon. A complete lie. I hadn't brought anything to defend myself, and I figured sounding like I wasn't alone was the smartest move I had. He nodded slowly, like he accepted that answer. Then he turned around and started walking back into the woods without another word. I watched him the whole time. As he got farther away, he started blending into the darkness between the trees. Right before he disappeared completely, he stopped and turned back toward my fire. He just stood there again, facing me. I got the feeling he didn't think I could still see him, but I could just barely make out his outline. He stood there for what felt like several minutes. I didn't want him to know I was watching, so I pretended to look down at my phone. My whole body was tense. I didn't feel safe going into my tent while he was still out there. Eventually, I looked back up, and he was gone. I stayed by the fire another 20 or 30 minutes, straining to listen for any more movement. I didn't hear anything else, but I didn't feel relaxed anymore. I finally put the fire out and got into my tent. I told myself I was overreacting, that he was probably just a curious camper. I lay there trying to fall asleep, but I don't think I ever fully did. About an hour later, I heard footsteps again. This time, they were much closer. I could hear them slowly moving around my campsite, leaves crunching in a slow circle around my tent. Then they stopped right outside. Everything went completely silent. I held my breath without even realizing I was doing it. I didn't know if someone was standing right outside the thin fabric of my tent, or if I was imagining it. And then I heard the sound of a man exhaling, right outside. Not loud, just a slow, quiet breath, like someone standing perfectly still. I don't think he was trying to make me hear it. I think I was just so hyper-focused at that point that I heard something I never would have noticed otherwise. Every instinct I had told me not to move, not to make a sound. I was afraid that if he knew I was awake, he might do something. So I stayed completely still, pretending to be asleep. After what felt like forever, the footsteps slowly moved away again. I waited a long time before even letting myself breathe normally. About 10 minutes later, the footsteps came back. Same slow circling. Same stopping right outside. Same silence. This went on for hours. Sometimes the steps would fade off into the distance, and I would think he had finally left, and then they would come back. Either he was walking away and returning, or he was standing somewhere in the trees just watching and coming closer whenever he felt like it. I never heard talking, but something about the way the steps sounded made me feel like it wasn't just one person anymore. I can't explain it. Maybe it was just fear, but the feeling wouldn't go away. At one point, I noticed the inside of my tent starting to get lighter. The sun was beginning to rise. I had been awake the entire night. As soon as there was enough light, I made my decision. I started stuffing everything into my bag as fast as I could. My hands were shaking the whole time. When I finally unzipped my tent and stepped outside, I immediately heard multiple sets of footsteps running off into the woods. Not one. Several. I couldn't see anyone, but I could clearly hear more than one person moving fast through the leaves, away from me. That was the moment I knew I hadn't imagined any of it. I didn't finish packing. I just grabbed what I could carry and started jogging back toward the trail. I kept expecting to hear someone following me. I didn't. I reached my car, locked the doors, and just sat there trying to calm down. At some point, I must have fallen asleep because I woke up hours later with the sun high in the sky. Part of me tried to rationalize everything. Maybe it was just a couple of campers messing with me. I even considered going back for the rest of my gear since I'd left some things behind in my rush. It was full daylight now. I figured whatever had happened at night wouldn't happen in the day. So I walked back down the trail. When I reached the spot where I was certain my campsite had been, I stopped completely. My tent was gone. My sleeping bag was gone. The small cooking supplies I left behind were gone. Every last thing was gone. The only thing remaining was the black circle of ashes from my fire. I walked around the area, thinking maybe I had the wrong spot, but I knew I didn't. The trees, the rocks, exactly how I remembered. Someone had taken everything. No trash, no damage. Just empty ground, like I had never been there. I didn't look around any longer. I turned around and walked straight back to my car. I didn't report it. I didn't try to find my stuff. I just wanted to leave without getting hurt. Losing the gear didn't matter anymore. I drove straight home, and I haven't gone camping alone since. Sometimes I still think about how many people were actually out there that night and how close they were standing to me while I lay there pretending to be asleep.